This video and all of its contents, including any opinions expressed by the narrator, are strictly for entertainment purposes only and is not intended in any way as a substitute for professional services and consultation from a licensed therapist, doctor, attorney, or other licensed professional service provider. Each person must make their own life decisions, and those decisions are theirs. Welcome back to Find Your Alpha, one of the most popular channels of its kind on YouTube. And we're back at you this week with another great story. You can see the title right on your screen. Nice guy has a nuclear reaction after wife confesses to cheating. Well, I guess he's no longer a nice guy. So let's find out what this story's all about. And she starts off with her original post. She says, I can't believe I, of all people, would be writing this, but here I am. For confidentiality reasons, I'm going to speak in generalities and use fake names. For this post, I'll call my husband Deegan and refer to myself as Jenny. My husband and I are in our 20s and have been married over 2 years. We met by chance out in public, started talking, exchanged numbers, and the rest, as they say, is history. It was a case of love at first sight. At least it was for me. We dated for 6 months and then lived together for a year prior to marrying. So these guys got married after being together just 18 months. Boy, that's way too quick. At the insistence of my parents, we had a big wedding. They paid for everything except for the bar and our honeymoon, which his parents paid for. My parents loved Deegan, and his parents loved me. Our marriage has been wonderful, and I wouldn't change a thing. Deegan treats me like a queen. Big mistake. And I treat him like a king. I doubt that. We just do this naturally to express our love. Now, hearing this, you may ask, what's the problem, lady? The problem is I cheated on Deegan with a work colleague 2 months ago, and now I'm overwhelmed with guilt. So here we go with another story of a woman cheating on her husband or her boyfriend, but in this case it's the husband, in the workplace with a coworker. Oh boy. Now, every time Deegan does something kind for me, I just crumble inside. I feel so awful, which you should, and undeserving, which you are. To try to make up for my betrayal, I've been extra attentive to him since returning from the trip. We're naturally so affectionate for each other, but I'm now going way beyond that. And you know what that is, guys? That's a big love bomb. My dad often jokes with us saying we should get a room as we're always engaged in some form of PDA. And that stands for public displays of affection. That means they're kissing all over each other and hugging each other out in public and when other people are present. And to me, sometimes that's also a sign of somebody going overboard. So you got to really be questioning that. As I said up front, I'm not going to get into specifics, but I want to explain how things develop with my colleague. Well, that's what we want to hear. I was selected to be part of a special assignment team for the company I work for. This program was a key initiative for the company and very important to our shareholders. Now, I had another story like this too. Working on the project was very gratifying, yet very taxing and extremely stressful. So much so that one of the women on our team suffered a nervous breakdown. We primarily worked on the project remotely, but did meet as a team 3 times during the process. Nearing the end of the project, something went wrong on the portion I was working on. This necessitated me going to one of the regional offices for a week to work on resolving the problem. Originally, 3 of us were set to go, but at the last minute, the woman I mentioned who had the nervous breakdown had to back out for obvious reasons. This left me and another colleague I'll call Percy to fix the problem so the project would be finished on time. So here comes Percy into the picture, And we know what's going to happen with Percy. It's very predictable with these stories. We were on deadline and worked nonstop from 7 a.m. to after 10 p.m. for the first 2 nights, spending every waking minute together. We'd work at the office and ordered in food for lunch and dinner. I was completely stressed, and I too felt as if I was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. Thankfully, by 4 p.m. on Wednesday, we fixed the problem. To celebrate, we went out to a nice restaurant to celebrate, and both of us had too much to drink. After we got back to the hotel, one thing led to another, and I cheated on my husband. Well, we want to know what this one thing was that led to another, because that's what is said in a lot of these stories by the cheater. It's like, oh, things happen spontaneously, or just one thing led to another, and then we ended up with our clothes off and in bed, and I just don't know how it happened. No, you know exactly how it happened. It was a misguided, spontaneous act. See what I'm saying? Initially, I didn't feel anything negative about it, as somehow I rationalized that we deserved it after working so hard. So she sounds like a stereotypical modern woman saying, oh, I deserve that because I work so hard. I deserve to have some release, even if it wasn't with my husband. So the following night, Percy and I repeated what we had done the previous night. So this wasn't a mistake, because not only did she do it night one, but she went back night two for a second helping. After we were together Thursday, the sobering reality of what we had done hit me first, then Percy, and we quickly came to regret our actions. Percy knew I was happily married, and I knew he was engaged to be married. Well, both of you are total dogs. We decided right there to put this out of our minds as if it never happened. We also were concerned if any information of this ever got out inside our company, it would ruin our reputations and potentially put our jobs in jeopardy, as we carried out the affair on a company-paid business trip. We parted that night and agreed to not speak or communicate again for any reason, unless it was absolutely necessary. Now, this is very similar to one of those stories I did before. So this might be something that folks who are predisposed to cheating may not want to get involved with these special projects, because it seems like with these special projects, when people were together on a special assignment, that things tend to happen there. This wouldn't be that difficult, as the project we worked on was a unique situation and we lived on opposite sides of the country, so the chances of us ever crossing paths again was low. We ended things that night and I put it all behind me, or so I thought. Flying home, I felt fine initially, but then started getting a pit in my stomach when I thought about greeting Deegan at the airport. I held it together until I made it to the pickup zone, and I saw him there waiting for me with a big smile on his face. This poor guy, he's thinking, oh, here comes the love of my life. She's coming back. I've been away from her for a week, and I just can't wait to see her, not knowing what she did the previous 2 nights. When I saw him, I just started crying and hugged and kissed him repeatedly, holding on to him for dear life. We were locked in an embrace for so long that an airport police officer came over and tapped on the window, motioning for us to move along to clear the pickup lane. Deegan asked me what was wrong, and I told him I had been under such stress and missed him so much that I just broke down when I saw him. He accepted this, and that night we shared a beautiful night of passionate love. Gosh, that is so gross. Because think about it, guys. Last night, the previous night, she was with this Percy. Oh my goodness, that is just nasty. Ever since I got home from the trip, I've been taking extra good care of him. He's enjoying it and deserves all the special attention I'm giving him, but I'm dying inside. My mind is being eaten away with guilt, and it's getting worse by the day. I have trouble sleeping and eating, and as a result, my work is suffering. All I want to do is be near my husband, and show him how much I love him. I've even had recurring nightmares of him finding out and leaving me. Last week, we made the decision to try to get pregnant, and that has made me even more emotional about everything. Now, I got to stop right here because she's saying we made the decision to try to get pregnant. Did we make the decision, or did you make the decision because you're fearful if he does find out, he'll leave you, but if you were with child, he would be tethered to you? I believe the latter in this case. I keep thinking in my head that I don't deserve him. You don't. Or he deserves someone better. He does. I don't think I can survive like this another week. No one knows about the affair except for Percy and I. This makes my situation even worse, as I have no one to talk to about this. I feel my inner conscience is telegraphing to me to be honest and tell Deegan what I've done. But I'm so afraid I'll lose him. I know if I tell him, he'll be devastated and wouldn't see me in the same way again. However, I do feel he'd eventually forgive me as he loves me so much and is such a kind, caring man. Translation here, folks. Deegan is a stereotypical nice guy. When a woman describes a man as being kind and caring by nature, that means he's a softie, and very likely in her mind means she sees him as a nice guy, probably someone, I'm just guessing, that she settled for. So this brings me to my question. Should I tell my husband about this meaningless affair I had 2 months ago, or should I remain silent and just continue to make it up to him in other ways? I'd really like to hear from those of you who betrayed and how you handled things. Don't hold back. I'd like to hear about both the good and bad outcomes. Jenny. So that's the end of her original post, and now we're going to take a look at some of the responses she got back from the community. But before we do that, I want to remind you, if you're liking what you hear so far, hit that like button. That will help get this video seen by people all over the planet. Now, let's take a look at those responses. All right, and the first response is from a guy. He says, "Your post brought back a lot of bad memories for me. I was you 31 years ago. That's when I cheated on my then wife of 2 years. It was just a stupid one-night stand, and I didn't plan to ever tell her since the woman lived on the opposite coast and I'd never see her again. Well, just like you, I was overcome with guilt, and I finally broke down and confessed to her. This broke her heart and completely changed how she felt about me. She tried making the marriage work, but she had lost all trust and would never let me touch her again, not even for a hug. She eventually filed for divorce. This set my life into a terrible downward spiral that lasted until 4 years ago when I met the woman who would become my fourth wife." So this guy, he's saying this happened 31 years ago. So he must be in his 50s somewhere, and he's already had 4 wives. Oh my goodness. For the first time since my first wife divorced me, I can honestly say I'm happy and at peace with myself. If I had to do it all over again, I wouldn't tell my then wife, as she was truly my soulmate. So here's another example, this time as a guy. He's with another woman now. He's married to her. This woman probably thinks, hey, they're a great match. But here he is telling the internet that, oh, you know what? My first wife was actually my soulmate. Not the wife I'm with now, but my first wife. If I didn't tell her, we'd be married today and I'd have a big, beautiful family like she and her husband have now. So my advice to you is don't tell your husband, and instead just be the greatest wife in the world to him. Good luck. Well, I disagree with you, poster. First of all, you got what you deserve because you cheated on what sounds like a very good woman, and she left you as she should have. Number two, yes, she should be honest and tell her husband, because if you were in her shoes, you would want to know as well. Now, the next response is from a woman. She says, you should tell him, but be prepared that your relationship will never be the same and may end. I cheated on my husband back in 2002. Like you, it was a stupid fling with a coworker. My husband stayed with me, but he has never fully trusted me again, and our love life was reduced to the occasional physical release for him. This is multiple stories now where women describe their relations with their husband after they cheated to being just raw S. And, no passion, no love making anymore. It's just him getting his release when he wants it. He stayed just for the kids as he couldn't stand not seeing them every day. And I've read that in a number of these posts where a lot of the guys that said they stayed with their wives under duress, the only reason they did it is because they wanted to see their kids every day. And if they divorced, they'd only see them at maximum 50% of the time. And a lot of the guys said, I just couldn't live with that. I got to see my kids every day. And I respect that. I respect that. It's just a shame that they have to stay in these miserable marriages just to be able to see their kids. She goes on and says, as soon as our youngest graduated high school, he presented me with the divorce papers, so he didn't waste any time. He explained that he had been miserable for the last 12 years and that he had no use for me now that our kids were all young adults. I was destroyed by this, as I had put my full heart and soul into the marriage and to satisfying my husband, but it wasn't enough to overcome the pain I caused him. I don't think you have kids together, so your risk of losing him is very high. So again, my advice to you is to tell him, but prepare yourself for the worst. So that's her advice. And then finally, we've got another response from a woman. She says, now listen to this. I created this account just to reply to you anonymously. My reply to you is going to be controversial, and I'm going to get a lot of hate for it. My recommendation is for you not to tell your husband. Reading your post made me cry, as it brought up old memories. Memories that, if ever discovered, would end my relationship with my husband and destroy my relationship with my kids. 19 years ago, I cheated on my then fiancé with a neighbor in the building where we lived. This neighbor worked from home and I was laid off at the time. So this woman was being supported by her fiancé. He was out there busting his butt, providing for her. She was laid off, laying around in the apartment, and guess what? She's hooking up with one of the neighbors. Total disrespect. Things just happened between us. No, things didn't just happen between you. You made a number of key decisions to get into that affair with your neighbor. So don't try to let on that, oh, it was just spontaneous and things just happened. No, it didn't. The affair went on for nearly 3 months, and we pretty much were together every weekday at his apartment. So let's figure this out. Let's just say every month has 4 weeks and you got 3 months, so that's 12 weeks. And she says she was with him every weekday. So that means 5 times 12. So she was with this guy at a minimum 60 times, all the while still having relations with her husband. Totally disgusting and totally disrespectful. This woman is trash. I mean, she's total trash. I don't care what she's done since that time. She is trash. Eventually, I came to my senses and broke it off with the guy. 4 months later, I married my fiancé. Poor guy. Today, we are the happiest couple in the world and have 3 beautiful children that look and act, laugh out loud, she says, just like their dad. I hate when people do that, because what she's trying to do is to spin to us, oh, I'm so in love with my husband and he's such a wonderful father. I, of course, never had any additional contact with the guy, and it just destroys me when I think about what I did and what I potentially jeopardized. I am, however, so thankful I never confessed. My husband is a strong and prideful man who would never stand for cheating. Even if he were to find out today what I did all those years ago, he would leave me on the spot with no questions asked. So my advice to you is not to tell him and instead make sure you meet and exceed his every expectation in every way possible, like I've done. It's worked out great for me. So, this woman's response should send shivers down the spines of married men out there. And now we're going to take a look at her updates. The first one is from 32 days after her original post. She says, "Thank you all for your heartfelt replies. I read each and every one of them and really appreciate you sharing your personal stories. After much thought and 3 sessions of counseling with a great therapist, I've made the decision to tell my husband. It's going to be difficult for me and devastating for him, but I have to do it. To prepare for this, I have written out a full timeline of the affair, which wasn't difficult since it was only physical for less than 24 hours and was never emotional." Well, let me just tell you something here, poster. It doesn't matter if it was emotional or not. You had the affair. That's all that matters. My therapist has also provided me with a number of great articles about how to help your spouse deal with your affair, specifically what not to do. I'm also prepared for him to want to be away from me for a time. From what I've read, this is perfectly natural, though I will be sad if he chooses to do that. As I said, my husband is a loving, caring man, aka nice guy. He is very giving and protective, so I don't think he'll react that way to this news. Rather, I think he will be hurt and disappointed by what I've done. I'm prepared for just about anything. Wish me luck, Jenny. So that was her original update. And now she comes back with a final update, but look at this final update when she put it out. 13 months after the last update, so 14 months from her original post. She says, "Hi everyone, it's been a long time since I posted here. So many of you have been reaching out asking me for an update on my situation. I really appreciate your interest and concern. I wanted to update you before this, but I had so much to deal with and just didn't have the time or energy to do so. Things just started settling down for me recently, so here I am. I'm going to pick up where I last left off. If you recall, I was about to confess to my husband about the brief affair I had with one of my work colleagues. My plan was to talk to him that Saturday morning, and I ended up doing just that. Though we had plans that afternoon, I specifically made sure we'd both be together that morning so that I could tell him without interruption. The morning of, I was a bundle of nerves and almost backed out of it. Looking back now, I wish I had. I fixed Deegan his favorite breakfast, and after we ate, I told him about the affair. He just looked at me attentively as I spoke without saying a word. After I finished, he just stared at me like he was looking right through me. He then excused himself and went into the office and closed the door. I went over and tried the door handle, but he had locked it. I spoke to him through the door and again told him how sorry I was and how much I loved him. So she's using tactics straight from the old handbook. I then told him I'd be waiting in the living room when he's ready to talk. From the articles I read, one of the things it said for a wayward to do is to give the betrayed plenty of space. So that's what I did. After a few minutes, I thought I heard him talking to someone, so I crept over to the door to see if I could make out what he was saying. I couldn't, so I just went back out to the living room. I then got a call from my mom, and I let it go to voicemail as I didn't have time to speak with her. Then about 10 minutes later, there was a knock at the door. When I looked out, I saw my parents standing there. I opened the door and was about to ask them to come back later, as Deegan and I were having a personal discussion now, when my mom said Deegan called and told them everything. I couldn't believe it and didn't know what to say. My dad asked if it was true, and I asked what? My dad asked, "Did you have an affair with one of your coworkers?" I said yes and started crying. My mom asked how I could do such a thing. Before I could answer, Deegan came out of the office and started talking to my parents, totally ignoring me and referring to me in the third person. He asked my dad to please take me out of there as he wasn't in a good frame of mind. I kept trying to talk to him, but he kept ignoring me, looking only at them as if I was invisible. Desperate for his attention, I went over and hugged him. While he didn't push me away, he didn't hug me back. After I released him, he went back into the office and again locked the door. My parents started asking me questions about the affair, and I got upset and ran into the bedroom. My mom followed me in, and we talked for a while, and then she helped me pack a few things. Before leaving, I told Deegan through the door how much I loved him and that I would stay away until he's ready to talk. I said I was going to my parents' house and would stay there as long as he needed. I didn't hear from him at all the rest of the day. I tried contacting him multiple times, but he didn't respond. In the last text I sent, I told him I was coming over as I was worried about him. He responded and asked that I please leave him alone. I cried all day and kept asking myself, how could something like this happen? When I got up Sunday morning, my parents were sitting at the table drinking coffee with sad looks on their faces. I thought they were just upset over what I had done, but there was more. My dad said Deegan came over sometime earlier that morning. I was so excited and asked if they talked to him. Dad said no, we didn't see him. I then asked how they knew he was there. My dad said because he left your car in the driveway with all of your belongings in it. I just said, "What?" and ran out to the driveway where I saw my SUV parked and filled to the brim with trash bags. Seeing that, I just broke down and fell to the ground crying. I couldn't believe what was happening. I told my parents I needed to go over to my house to talk to Deegan. When I got there, he was home but didn't answer the door. I then tried opening the doors with my keys, but he had the internal deadbolts locked and couldn't get in. So these must be these deadbolts that don't have an outside key access. So if somebody's in there and they put the deadbolt on, then you can't get in. I then thought to open the garage door and get in that way, but when I checked my visor, Deegan had removed the remote. I then thought I could enter the garage via the keypad, but he had changed the code, so I was completely shut out of my own house. Since it was early on Sunday morning, I didn't want to wake the neighbors, so I started texting him. At first I was nice, but he didn't respond. I then sent him a text saying it was my place too, and he just can't lock me out. He texted back, "Sue me." So he's basically taunting her saying, yeah, I am locking you out, and if you don't like it, guess what? Sue me. I couldn't believe the once kind, caring man I loved with all my heart was treating me like this. Yes, I deserved punishment, but not like this. At a minimum, I expected he would be civil and not act like an insane person. Eventually, I went back to my parents' house, locked myself in my old room, and just cried my heart out for most of the day, totally bewildered by the last 24 hours. I again tried contacting Deegan all day, but he didn't respond. On Monday morning, I called my boss and took 3 days off to deal with the situation. I went over to the house Monday morning and was able to get in. Deegan wasn't there, and when I looked in our bedroom, I saw that all of his clothes were gone. I then went into the office, and there I saw something that just destroyed me. It was the cover of our wedding album sitting beside the shredder. Deegan had removed all the pictures and shredded them. I couldn't believe it. As I walked around the house, I noticed all the pictures of us were missing. Searching further, I found all the empty frames and realized he shredded them too. I was so saddened and couldn't believe what was happening. I called Deegan's office and talked to the receptionist. I asked if I could speak with him, and she told me that he would be out of the office for the rest of the week. She said he had taken the week off. I then called my mother-in-law. She answered and said Deegan told her and my father-in-law everything. I asked if she knew where he was. She said yes, but I'm not going to tell you where, and hung up on me. Now remember, this woman said that his parents loved her. I was hurt by this, as I was so close to my in-laws. On Wednesday of that week, I started getting calls from Percy. Now remember, Percy is the AP, her affair partner. I ignored all his calls and sent them the voicemail. Later on, when I listened to his messages, and he was asking me to please call him ASAP. Finally, in his last message, he said Deegan somehow contacted his fiancée and told her all about the two of us. I wonder how he found out who specifically this guy was, because she doesn't specify whether she told him the guy's name and gave any information. And then number two, I wonder how this Deegan found out about this guy's fiancée. Interesting. Maybe he got it off of social media. Hearing this, I called Percy, and he was angry. He said we promised each other not to tell anyone. I told him I know and that I should have told him before I talked to my husband, but I didn't think he'd react the way he did. Percy then told me he told his fiancée my husband was lying and that nothing happened. He said she was going to call me and that I needed to tell her the same thing. So he's asking her to lie. I told him I couldn't do that, and he started begging me. I again said I wouldn't lie. Once he heard this, he started berating me and calling me terrible things and wouldn't stop, so I hung up on him and blocked his number. A few minutes later, I got a call from his fiancée, and I told her everything. She was silent as I explained what happened, and when I finished the story, she just hung up on me. The nightmare didn't end there, though. When I went back to work the following day, I was called to the HR director's office. She's a friend of mine, so I didn't think anything of it. But when I got there, she had an HR manager with her along with a director of security. I knew something was up, and I likely was in trouble. She asked me to sit down and said they have a few questions for me. They said they were contacted by someone who said that Percy and I engaged in an affair while on company time using company resources. My stomach sunk and I started crying. Then I told them what we had done, but explained nothing happened during work hours. The HR director explained that when our salaried employees travel for business, the entire trip is considered work time. That's interesting. She went on to explain that the hotel room is considered a company resource since it was paid for by the company. They then went on to ask me about the second night that Percy and I were together. They asked if I ate dinner with Percy that night, and I regrettably admitted that I did. They then asked if I drank wine. I said yes. They asked me how much, and I said 2 glasses. They then asked if I purchased the wine, and I said no, Percy did. The HR director told me that is against company policy, as employees are not permitted to use another employee's card for food or drinks. In the end, I received a final written warning for the infractions, and Percy was terminated. Now, before you say I received preferential treatment as a woman, I assure you that I did not. Percy would have gotten the same if that's all he did, but unfortunately for him, he did more. Percy was fired because he extended his stay by 1 additional day with no business justification, and he expensed the entire thing, including the flight change fee, the hotel, and all of his meals, which included the 2 bottles of wine. He extended his stay just to sleep with me the following evening. I feel horrible about what happened to Percy. He was a great employee with a bright future, but now he is unemployed and his fiancée left him all because of me. As for me, any hopes of ever getting a promotion after this are slim. The following Monday at work, Deegan had me served with divorce papers at the reception desk. So this Deegan, her husband, is not wasting any time whatsoever. He truly did go nuclear here. The receptionist called me It looks like she's missing a couple words here, and said, I had a delivery up front. If you notice throughout this, she had a couple grammatical errors and also a couple missing words that I kind of put in there as I was reading it. When I got up there, a man was waiting for me with a box of flowers. I hoped they were from Deegan, and they were. However, after I signed for the package, the gentleman handed me the box of flowers and then handed me the divorce papers and proclaimed that Mrs. Jenny Blank, you have officially been served with divorce papers. My life shattered right there, and I broke down crying. I had to leave the office and took the rest of the week off. For the next 7 months, I tried everything to save my marriage, but Deegan refused even to speak with me. In fact, he's never spoken another word to me since I made my confession. So he totally cut her off after he found out that she cheated on him. And you know what, guys? I have to say, that's the right thing to do. Become indifferent. Now, this guy was beyond indifferent. You can see he's very bitter, which I can understand that. But he totally cut her off, and that's what's driving her insane. Our divorce is now final, but I'm still an emotional mess. I love and miss the kind man he was before my affair, but realize that man no longer exists. No, he doesn't exist because you changed him. My actions have turned him into a cruel monster. I'm still holding out hope that one day he will have a change of heart and we can be a couple again, but that light is fading fast. A friend of mine told me that Deegan has been dating one of our former neighbors from the townhome community where we lived. I was casual friends with this woman, and I couldn't believe she'd do this to me. What do you mean, do this to you? You guys are divorced now, so you don't have any ownership of your husband or any rights to your husband. He's a free agent now. He can date whoever he wants, and this woman has nothing to you. She was a casual friend of yours. She has no loyalty to you. I deserve to suffer for what I did, but I never expected Deegan to react the way he did. I knew there was a remote possibility my confession would end our relationship, but I thought the chance of this was 1 in a million. See, that's really why she did it. Because she took for granted that she had a loving husband who was a nice guy. The chances of him really getting a backbone and standing up and divorcing her was remote, like she says, 1 in a million. So she's totally shocked by what happened. I want to end this by sending a message to my husband. Babe, if you ever read this, I want you to know that I'm truly sorry and will love you forever, Jenny. So that's her story. Now, what's interesting here is some of the responses she got after she told the full story. You'd be surprised how many people were criticizing the husband, saying, oh, he sounds like an angry man. He sounds like he's got anger management problems. Thank goodness you got away from this crazy guy when you did. The fact that he didn't speak to you, that is just ridiculous. It's very childish. So there were a number of people, that were on her side in this whole thing. Now, I have to say, the majority of the people supported the husband, saying, hey, lady, what did you expect? You cheated on the poor guy. He worshiped the ground you walked on, and yet you treated him like that. You deserve what you got. So that's the story, and now we're going to take a look at what I think are some of the morals of the story. Number one, though they say otherwise, women generally do not respect nice guys. That's a fact, guys. That's a fact, and this story illustrates that perfectly. Number two, if you treat her like a queen, she is likely going to treat you like a peasant. Now, this woman says otherwise. She said her husband treated her like a queen and she treated him like a king. I guarantee he did way more for her than she was doing for him. Number three, and we've talked about this in multiple stories, I think including the last one. Love bombing is a potential sign that something may be amiss with your relationship. If all of a sudden, out of the blue, you're getting all this special treatment by your woman, you got to step back and say, wow, this is great. I really am enjoying this, but I wonder why she's doing this. And then finally, the truth will set you free, even if you don't want to be. Now, what I mean by that is her mind now is clear. So she doesn't have this lie that she was holding inside, eating away at her mind. But now she's free from that. But she's also free from her husband because I think he did the right thing and got a divorce from her. So, those are my thoughts. And now I want to hear from you. What did you think of this story? Would you have handled this situation like this guy did? Or would you have done something different? Would you have never spoken to her again and just cut her off? Or would you have been more cordial to her and professional and, more understanding? And maybe even would you have tried to work things out with her? Tell us about your thoughts in the comments. Also, be sure to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to this channel. And I will talk to you on the next one.